Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show on this Sunday. Glad to have you guys here. Uh, it's October 27th, 2024, almost November. Elections are almost just a few days away. We're going to see what happens, but we got a lot going on. There's something I'm very, very concerned about, very, very worried about, and it's not what you might think. And when I explain it to you guys, maybe you guys will start to see it. But let's get in there and let's take a look at what's going on. I'm going to tell you guys, North Korea, uh, right now they're talking about military action if North Korean troops enter Ukraine. In other words, how would this military action play out? It says the U.S. should consider direct military action in Ukraine. In other words, I guess they're talking about boots on the ground? Is that what they're talking about? If North Korean troops invade Ukraine, in other words, but I mean, what we all know, we've even Lloyd Austin said that there is North Korean troops in Russia. They're training. There's conflicting accounts of how many. Some say 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 12,000. Don't know the exact amount. But they're training. They're getting ready. Well, they're not going to go to Russia, travel to Russia, train to operate in Ukraine, and just go home. You know? Yeah, that's what the plan. I think the plan is they're planning to head into Ukraine to fight alongside the Russians in Ukraine. And it says that the U.S. should consider military action if North Korean troops enter. In other words, World War III. In other words, basically what they're saying is if North Korean troops enter Ukraine, the U.S. should consider direct military action. In other words, World War III. Because the Russians are fighting in Ukraine. If openly the Americans start fighting in Ukraine, you got this thing escalates out of control. It says Republican Mike Turner, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, he said on Wednesday that the U.S. should consider direct military action. Said if North Korean troops were to invade Ukraine's sovereign territory, the United States needs to seriously consider taking direct military action against the North Korean troops. The U.S. has provided the Ukraine army with weapons since the war began and has avoided military action. This would put it into direct conflict with Russia. A conflict between the United States and Russia would tie all countries in NATO, including Canada and 28 European countries, in this Article 5 they're talking about. Now, going over to the war that's going on over in Israel. They're talking that the IDF, that's Israel, their strike has crippled Iran's missile production, and it's disabled their air defenses. And it says that the regime is alarmed. But this article has come from the Times of Israel. So we're getting the story from the Israeli press here, the Times of Israel. That's what this story's from. So it says the IDF strike has crippled Iran's missile production and disabled their air defenses. Yeah, there was a strike on Iran by Israel, directly on Iran. This is what's new. It's not their proxies that Israel strike, and it's directly on Iran. And now there's a waiting game going on to see if Iran's going to strike back. And this has been going on. We've saw this tit-for-tat sort of business going on for the last couple months. They're wait, and then Iran attacks back, and then you wait, and then Israel strikes back, and then you wait, and then Iran strikes back, and back and forth, back and forth. But it's been a slow escalation during this period of time as well. Now, at the same time, we've got a military exercise, Joint Sword, going on over around Taiwan with China. China's sitting back and they're waiting and watching the scene out there. This is the scene. You can bet that there's a possibility here. It says right here, have we ever seen a time when 4 major global wars are percolating simultaneously? It says we have reached a moment in time that none of us will forget. Now, I'm going to get into now talking about what I'm very worried and very concerned about, especially for the United States of America. And that would include Canada, but especially for the United States of America. Very, very concerned about this. Amongst Americans, and Canadians too, about 90% of our population, yeah, they've been watching this stuff, the war stuff, but they're not concerned. They know, a lot of them know about it, that 99%. Now, there's 1% out there who not only watch it, they follow it, they track it, they're very concerned, they know what's going on with all this. Most of you guys in my audience are of that 1%. So you're not shocked by any of this stuff and everything. You know, you see the mission creep. You see the creep toward World War III that's been going on for a while now. And what you've done is you've assimilated that in your mind. You're very concerned about it. You're very upset about it, but you're not panicked. You're the 1%. Okay? You're not panicked over it or anything because it's not something new. It's not something unexpected. What makes a person... Look, maybe a wife comes home, or something, and she tells her husband, you better sit down for this one, because she knows it's going to be a shock. Okay? So we got 99% of the people out there. They know about what's going on over there, unless they really got their head. There's probably 15 or 20% of them that don't even know what's going on. They don't even know there's a war in Ukraine, or not paying any attention. There's probably a small percentage that doesn't even know. Probably bigger than the percentage of people, the 1% who's watching my show, that don't know nothing. They don't even know there's a war in Ukraine. Okay, so but they're part of that 99% of the population out there. And this is what I'm concerned about is as this thing moves forward, slowly in the background, this thing moving toward war, toward these 4 fronts of a World War III that we're moving toward, is creeping along in the background toward. It's going to hit a critical point, or a critical mass point, where it's going to hit the media big at a certain point. And it's not going to be the side story or the back story or the 99%. Is suddenly going to be right in their face in these 99%. Every newspaper they pick up, every show they watch, all over their precious social media, all of that 99%, they really tune into social media. It's going to be right there. World War III is starting. Oh my God, we're going to die. It's going to hit them all at once. It's going to be a sudden sort of thing where the 99% wakes up all at once and says, oh my gosh, nukes. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? This is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm very concerned about. Is this sudden realization amongst the 99% when it's all over their TikToks and their social media, and their influencers are all, when the influencers out there, when they panic, then the 99% will panic at the same time. And now I'll get to what I'm really talking about and help you guys understand. If you guys remember the War of the Worlds broadcast by Orson Welles in 1938, it was a radio play. Just a radio show. Back then, they didn't watch TV so much. They didn't have their TikToks and their internet and their cell phones and everything. But what they did have was radios. Everybody had a radio at home, just like now they have a cell phone. Everybody had the radio back then. They used to listen to it. It was really good entertainment because they used to play these. It's not like now. People say, oh, radio, that's no good, because people tune the radio on now and all you hear is bubblegum music, bubblegum pop music, or maybe country music or some of these different channels and stuff, but it's not entertaining, really. I suppose it's not really meant to be. People use it for work or whatever, and they turn the station on. They listen to the radio while they're working, stuff like that. Now, but back in those days, they used to tune into the radio for entertainment. They had radio shows, dramas, and you could listen to the radio, and they'd tell a really good story. Stories like they had different ones, the radio dramas. So this was a radio drama, and it was about, but it sounded too much like a news story. It sounded like news that was really happening. I guess at the start of the radio drama, they told them that this is just a theatrical production or whatever, but as a lot of people didn't tune in at the start, maybe they missed that, and it sounded like a real radio news broadcast, and they thought Mars was attacking the Earth. And there was a panic from it. But the panic could have been much, much, much greater because there was another radio show playing opposite it that was more popular. So a lot of people didn't tune in to War of the Worlds. They tuned into that other show instead. The panic would have been much larger if it had been the only show on where they watched it. But it still caused a panic. War of the Worlds. And looking at this picture right here, it almost looks like War of the Worlds, but it's actually World War III on this thing with this globe, That can cause a bigger panic than what you could ever imagine because of the training we've had. Ever since we're little children, when we get around 6 or 7 or maybe 8 years old, we find out, whether we find out at school or from our parents, or we find out about nuclear weapons and their potential. And what we do is we put it in the back of our brain, sort of kind of like what we do with death, or really severe illnesses or cancer. People don't want to think about cancer, or death and stuff. And they don't want to think about nuclear war either, And so we put it in the back of our brain. But that fear of that is there amongst that 99% of the population. Tremendous fear. So when it finally, if this keeps creeping toward World War III, there's going to be a day coming in the future, I can't tell you exactly when social media is going to really get concerned, and these influencers out there are going to suddenly start saying, oh my God, and they're going to panic. And then the people, they only listen to the influencers. They're always on their cell phones at 99%, listening to the influencers and watching influencers, and it's a big thing for them to follow. They follow this person, they follow that person, whatever, right? Well, what about the day comes when the people that they're following tell them, okay, we're in trouble? And that'll spread. It's hard to know how they will react. And this is what I've been telling you guys for a while now. I've been calling it a human stampede. But I think the possibility of it being much worse in the West, because of also the second overlay on all of this. Like, you got one overlay, which is that fear that is built into them from very early on in adulthood and all the way through their life, not even adulthood, but children. They learn about nuclear war. That fear permeates the atmosphere, and it's done so for all the time I've been alive. I learned about it when I was a little kid. And I had that fear there, and it carried it through life. Don't think about it all the time. I just think about it once in a while. Maybe if I see a headline like this, World War III. But other than that, like when this show's over, I'll put it in the back of my mind. But if it comes to the forefront, how will people react? It's hard to say exactly. And I think the West is more susceptible to this. This reaction, this over-the-top reaction where people might start to actually panic. I think the West is more susceptible to this, and they're more susceptible to media influence on them. So we're going to have to wait and see about this, but you guys have been warned about this. And why I'm warning you guys this morning about this, because I'm starting to think to myself, hey, we might be rapidly approaching that day when this goes over the top and this actually happens, what I'm talking about. And in fact, I almost guarantee you that a part of that 99% of the people who they're starting to get a little bit concerned at this point. Some of them. It's probably filtering in. It's probably not. Maybe 2 weeks ago it was 99%. Now maybe it's only 95% or something. It's starting to filter into that 99%. But when it finally hits, it's going to be almost all of them are going to suddenly wake up to this situation that, hey, the world is heading toward a disastrous war situation. So let's take a look at this article. Have we ever seen a time when 4 major global wars are percolating simultaneously? We've reached a moment in history that none of us will forget. We are literally standing on the precipice of the unthinkable, and most people don't even realize it. That's what they're talking about here. If we do not change course, billions of precious souls could die during the nightmarish global wars that are rapidly approaching. See, it's this kind of media right here that could trigger this reaction that I'm talking about. When people read stuff like that, if we do not change course, billions of precious souls could die during the next nightmarish global war that's rapidly approaching. People read that, maybe they're part of that 99%, and then all of a sudden they say, what? I didn't know that this could become a global war and we could all, oh my gosh. Then how do they react? Well, maybe their reaction will be to run out to the local store and buy stuff that they think they might need. People, there's another thing about people is when they're faced with a crisis situation, then they tend to, it's an impetus for them to react to it in one way or another. So there's what I'm worried about, guys. See, they're saying it right here in this article. It says, at this moment, most Americans have no idea that a war between the United States and China is coming. Just a few days ago, President Xi Jinping boldly talked about preparing for war as he was dressed in military fatigues. He commanded his troops to strengthen their preparedness for war while visiting the People's Liberation Army rocket force. Xi, or I pronounced that right, Xi Jinping said that the military should comprehensively strengthen training and preparation for war and ensure troops have solid combat capabilities. Says the reason that China would need to prepare for war is planning to invade Taiwan. Not necessarily. I'm thinking what they just did with this joint sword operation a few days ago looks all the world to me like a blockade. That's what it looks like to me. It doesn't look like an invasion, what their operation that they were doing. It looked to me like a blockade. But if they got aggressive with Taiwan, they blockaded Taiwan off. Could that be considered as an act of war? I'm not exactly sure how the United States would react to that if that were to happen. I'm just saying, what if, you know? You guys can see the stuff's not good out there right now, and it's getting worse really fast. We're heading toward a four-front war. You say, well, what's the fourth front? I know the first front's Ukraine. Second front is the Middle East, Iran, Israel. Third front is possibly China doing something with Taiwan. But what's the fourth front? It's probably the Korea. The North and South Korea. That's a war that's still going. I can actually include that in the third front and say that it's a war that never really ended in the past. They created what was called a dead man zone, a DMZ, and they never ended the war. But now they got super weapons of mass destruction, especially North Korea. Now, let's take a look at what happened this week in finance. Uh, how would war affect these financial markets if it becomes much bigger than it is now? It becomes direct warfare. In other words, World War III starts. And I don't necessarily think that World War III might not start with a bang. Everybody thinks, okay, World War III starts and then the nukes flying. No, it might not be that way at all. It might be more like a slow thing where it's like they get directly involved with boots on the ground, but it's like goes on like the war in Ukraine's went on and on and on. It might, the first part of it, like it might do that for a year or 2 years or 3 years until certain nations start to run out of troops. You know, in the West, that's a big problem for the West. I don't think that's going to be a problem for China. Russia said that they can get 20 million troops too, I think it is. If I got that number right, I think that they can get as many as 20 million troops in Russia. In China, they could have 1 billion. just kidding, but I mean, they could have a lot of troops in China. China don't have to worry about that, I don't think. It's the West that's having the trouble. The men, the military, the entire West is like they got 800,000. I guess that's all of the West. I think they got 800,000 troops. Sounds like a lot, but when you say Russia can muster up 20 million, China could probably muster up another 20 million or whatever. Those numbers dwarf what the West could get. And the only way the West going to get a lot more is if they reinstate the draft. And how's that going to go over? Just saying. How's that going to go over? I think how they typically do it is they bring the draft and they what is it, like from 18 to 22 or something's the first wave that goes out, and then they take from 22 to 26, and then they go from 26 to 32, and if the war continues on, in the end they're like, they'll come after me. I'm 62, and they'll still, like, if they keep fighting, then they'll take anybody, kids. I mean, in the end, they get desperate enough. That's when you get to the point. I'm going to make my point. That's when you get to the point where the nukes are ready to fly, because invasions are imminent. At that point, when countries start to completely run out of weapons and troops, then the only thing left is nukes to stave off the enemy at that point. Think about that for a minute. I'm just saying. That's my opinion only, but by the way, but I think it's true. That's what I believe. Now, this week with the financial markets, so the S&P 500 is down 87 points over the week, at 24,000. No, that's the S&P. We're going to do the S&P 500. Sorry. The S&P 500 is down 1.74 points. It's at 5808. And the Dow, she's down 259 on the week at 42,114. We got our crude oil at 71.69. It's up $1.50. And we got our Bitcoin. Bitcoin is up a little bit too at 93,000 Canadian. Don't get all excited, guys, when I said 93,000. That's Canadian dollars. You got to chop about 25% off of that to get the American price. But that's where it ended the week, up a little bit. I can see now the election. I'm going to go so far as to say that, remember when I said that, now that was a few months back, I said that silver, let's take a look at silver right now. I said that silver was going to, and gold. When I'm talking about silver, I'm actually talking about silver, gold, and cryptos. Sort of. On this. So I'm going to cover all three. Might as well cover all three. I said that silver was going to tread water up until the election. Well, we're close enough to the election now where it can start to, that's happened, and it's a little bit on the high side of treading water, because when I said that, I think it was around what, 28, 28, $29, and it's went up to 33. So it's went up a little bit more than I expected during that period in time, but that just shows the heat underneath the burner pushing it up. It's boiling a little bit quicker than I thought. But I think now what's going to happen is now we're going to start to see the real thing where they've got to come out here and support the economy of the West. Because look, uh, trade done in renminbi, which is the Chinese currency, back around before the year 2008, it was only less than 1% of trade from China was done in the renminbi, and over 83% of trade from China was done in the United States dollar. Now, we're not going back very long ago, just into the early 2000s. Okay? Now, that's reversed. Trade in the U.S. dollar, China trade in the U.S. dollar has went down below 50%. It's dropped from like 83% down to below 50%, but the renminbi is the big story. Trade in the renminbi has shot up more than the dollar. The two lines have crossed on the chart. I looked this morning, and that's absolutely unbelievable, and it's still in the process of going in that direction. It shows you the erosion of the dollar in world trade. Well, they're just sick. They're just sick of it. The Federal Reserve set up a Ponzi scheme. The people should be more sick of it than the BRICS are. Why aren't they? I mean, don't you realize that they're actually robbing, turning all of us poor, and making themselves rich with this Ponzi scheme? But see, they're trying to do it to all the BRICS nations too. They've been giving them the what's the term? Giving them the shaft or whatever for years. And now they're just sick of it. They don't want it anymore. They're like, we're not going to work hard just to make you rich with your stupid Ponzi scheme that in the end blows up anyway. We're not going to go down with it. We're breaking free from this crap. We recognize that you are a bunch of crooks and you put this in you way a long time ago and set up this system that the world depends upon, the world runs on it. Not anymore. They're breaking free from it, and they're capturing more and more of the world's GDP in the BRICS nations and their BRICS banks and everything else they're creating over there. What does that mean? It means war. Because the Empire, just like in Star Wars with Darth Vader and the Empire and everything, the Empire is going to strike back at a certain point. They're not going to go down in flames and let the BRICS have it all. You got to hope and prayer if they're going to give up that exorbitant privilege that they have that was created back when they put the Fed in power of it all. The Fed's the big, powerful bank of the world, They're like Rome was, and so these other nations that are trying to break free are kind of like Spartacus and his armies, trying to break free from the Roman Empire. They're going to, at some point, the whole thing's just going to turn into a total mess. And this is what's driving war out there. These wars out there and stuff are a symptom of a much larger disease, and the disease is in finance. The world is set up on a crooked basis, and this is what's generating the impetus for war. Plus, you got a lot of warmongers out there who they really want power and money. And so this article where it says right here where did it say it? It says, if we do not change course, billions of precious souls could die during a nightmarish global war that is rapidly approaching. It says we do not change course. Well, I see it going in this direction, and that's the direction it's going. And what's going to change it? I don't know. I do believe, personally, that Anyway, this is what's going on with all this. It's a mess. You gotta prepare best you can. If a person had I mean, you know what? If I had like a lot of money, which I don't, I would find some place out from underneath this nuclear stuff. Probably go, maybe, I don't know, where would you go to try to escape the whole northern hemisphere? You couldn't stay there because, honest to God, if the radiation doesn't get you the, the no power and very poor growing season, I would look for a strategic relocation. I would, if I had a lot of money, to get out from underneath the northern hemisphere and find some place where they have year-round growing season, because that's going to be important. Here, you don't even have one good growing season here. Now, I mean, it used to be you'd have one growing season in the summer where you could start your crops off in the spring and harvest them before fall. Now, the shitty weather we have here, we don't even have one decent growing season. But there are places on Earth where you can grow multiple crops. And that's the kind of place you need to be, where the climate is very suitable. Because food and water is going to... See, I'm going to tell you guys, to survive what's coming, and we're on the precipice of it now, you just need a few things. And you don't need any luxury. You need to be able to have a bed that's dry and warm. Dry, warm place where you can sleep. And, I mean, people think about that. They think of a big, like we have now, big luxurious bedroom, with sliding glass doors there and everything else, and heat and central heat and air and all that kind of stuff. You don't need all that. You just need someplace that's dry. Animals out there, they just have a cubby hole. That's all they have where they sleep. They curl up. They have a little hole in the ground. They just curl up in a little hole in the ground. That's it. They got a nice dry place to sleep, like a mouse or whatever, maybe out in the woods. They don't got a big bedroom with sliding glass windows and central heat and air and all that kind of stuff. So you need that. You need a dry, warm place to sleep where you're safe and you can sleep safe. And you need your food and water. That's all you need. If you can keep those four things coming through the crisis and you don't get sick, a little bit of luck, don't get sick or not get injured or anything like that, you can make it through this thing. Just to meet those small requirements. People think they need a lot more than what they really need. You don't really need all this stuff. People are all going to lose it anyway. If people think that they're going to make it through the next 7 or 8 years of what's coming and be able to retain everything they got, including their bank accounts, this is a complete change. I don't care if you got $10 million, $100 million in the bank right now. 100 million times zero is still zero, and that's what the dollar's going to go to. Now, these other things like gold and silver might go in the opposite direction to the moon. And the dollars might... You think this can happen? It happened in Weimar, Germany, and it can happen all over again. All through these currencies that are all connected, like the Canadian dollar is connected to the United States dollar. It derives its value from the United States dollar, and the United States dollar derives its value from oil. It's not well, now it's fiat. But when Kissinger went over and made the deal for the petrodollar, it was a loose peg. They took it off of gold and they put it on oil. And it was the only thing you could buy oil with. And so that was that loose peg. It wasn't directly pegged to oil, but that loose peg now is pretty much ending or over. And so now it's becoming a fiat currency and has to stand on its own two legs as fiat. In other words, only has value by decree of the United States government, which is so indebted, it's a defunct corporation. So what do you think's going to happen? But they'll come out with all new payment systems and stuff structured in some other way, and they'll do just like they did when the Confederate War was on. They printed all those Confederate dollars, and they were worth nothing, and then they switched to something else. It happened all over again. And so fortunes will be lost overnight. But this is a restructuring of the entire world. Bretton Woods is going down the toilet and something new's coming. And this is a fight for what's new that's coming. There's two sides of the world, and they both want control over what's new and what's coming that's going to be the new money. It's all about money. Everything's about money. They do anything. But if they carry it too far, money becomes worth nothing. So they fight and fight for money, earn a few extra bucks, make some more weapons, whatever, and they're getting fat and rich from all this money they're getting. And then they send $50 billion more to Ukraine that ends up in their pockets because they were building whatever, building missiles or something like that, right? So they get the money, and they're getting fatter and richer, and they're thinking, okay, let's get this war, keep it going, let's make more war, and then they carry it too far, and it becomes nuclear or whatever. Then all of a sudden, if the infrastructure that supports the currencies and stuff gets annihilated, then the currency's not worth nothing. In other words, if you can't maintain a power supply to the people, and the whole power grid goes down because your enemy's blowing your power grid up or whatever, and you can't fix it, and the society becomes unstructured, then, if a guy's got a can of coffee and another guy walks down the street after that's happened, right? And there's no power anymore, we're in a shift disaster or whatever, and he says, I'll give you $1,000 for one cup of coffee. Guy says, what good is $1,000 to me if I can't spend it? If the system's down, the credit system's all entirely down, nobody knows who owns what, and you're offering me money? It ain't money anymore. And this would apply to these defense contractors and stuff who are building the weapons. If they push the button too far and the world ends up going into Mad Max, then try to spend your dollars in the bank because they're all just digital anyway. It won't even show up. You can't even see what you got. The bank's been blown up by a bomb now. You can't check your account balance. What account balance? So you've just killed the goose that laid the golden egg. Because you were getting so fat and rich before the world blew up. Now the world blew up, and now what are you going to do? How are you going to spend your money? So they don't think about stuff like that. That doesn't go through their head. That's because they get set on one track, and that track is all the way through their life. Just make money, make money, make money, make money, make more money. Where's opportunities? Make money, 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 money. Boom! Money ain't worth nothing. Well, they should know that there's an end to that track anyway, and naturally. Because when you go 6 feet under the ground, and daisies are growing on top of you, you're pushing up daisies, you can't do nothing with your money anyway either. So what is this game, this Monopoly game that they're all playing out there, where it's kind of like a bunch of kids sitting around a table, playing Monopoly, and Aunt Martha comes in and she says, you kids gotta pack it in. It's getting late. You're gonna have to go home. You gotta pack it in. That's it. Mom, I got all this money. I'm the banker. It's not real money. And the dollars and all this stuff, it's not any more real. It's the same deal. So what we're talking about here is post-apocalyptic. How are you gonna take it with you then? Can't take it with you and you die either. I don't want to go on and on about this, but it is. I'll be very specific about this. It's not logical. They do not think logical. People that are involved in the chase of money, it's like gold fever, people, the same thing, takes over their mind. It takes over, just want more, more, more. I mean, some of these people out there they got like hundreds of billions of dollars. You can't spend it, and if they were to take the money and burn it in a stove, they could keep themselves warm all winter, and they'd never spend it all. They'd always have more to burn, money to burn. Maybe they're making $100 million a day, every single day, and they want to make $200 million a day. They want to make $400 million a day. Where does it all end? I'm not going to go on and on about that, but it's not logic anymore. Actually, at a certain point, it doesn't become logic anymore. Same way with the chase for power out there. At a certain point, it's not even logical. It's just sort of kind of like these. I'll say one last analogy about it all. It's kind of like these mothers, who raise a bunch of kids, and when the kids go off to college or whatever, they get the empty nest syndrome. Well, they get so deep into this make money, make money, make money. When they start to get to a certain point where they're not able to continue with that, maybe they're 80 years old or whatever, but that in their brain, that thing is still going. It's like got momentum, and it's kind of like the woman who took care of the kids all her life, and then they go off to college and the house is empty. It's like it's still in the brain to continue to sew and to mend clothes and do all the things that they were doing. Well, it's the same way with these people make money. They're just like, that's their life. It's got nothing to do with logic. Anyway, okay. Let's get on and take a look at the dollar index. I think is the last thing. No, we didn't check bonds and rates yet. What we're looking at is rising yields here. We're looking at 4.24 on the U.S. 10-year at the end of the week, and the U.S. 30-year is at 4.5. It's up 3.4 basis points. And finishing off with our dollar index at 104.32, and it's rising a little bit. Yeah. We're on. I don't think that they're gonna go for this all out nuclear war, but I think that they might. If they do go for that, I think it's going to be toward the end when they run out of troops, run out of ammunition. That could be the danger point. But there's also the fact that they could get a World War III going, and then at a certain point, they could. The whole thing could just come to ceasefires and ceasefire agreements and stuff like that. Wars can end suddenly too, So it's not absolutely given. It's certainly not a given that the world's going to blow up in a nuclear thing. That's not going to necessarily happen, But the fear of that could translate into the people into panic at a certain point if they push this too far. And what would that look like? Anyway, I talked a lot this morning. 43 minutes is one of my longest shows I've ever done. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you later. You have a great day. Bye-bye.